I never thought I would become the kind of woman who locks her bedroom door at night in her own home. But here I am, 73 years old, listening to the floorboards creak outside my room at 2 in the morning, my hand trembling as I reach for the glass of water on my nightstand. The house Robert and I built 46 years ago no longer feels like mine. It feels like a cage I'm being slowly pushed out of. One passive-aggressive comment at a time, one rolled eye, one sigh that says I'm a burden nobody asked for. My son Michael lives here now, with his wife, Amanda, and their 2 children, whom I barely see anymore even though we share the same roof. They moved in 3 years ago, right after Robert died. Michael said it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. Amanda had lost her job. They were drowning in debt, and I was drowning in grief. So I said yes. I said yes because I couldn't stand the silence in this house. I said yes because I thought maybe, just maybe, having family around would make the mornings bearable again. I was wrong. Amanda changed everything. At first it was small things. She rearranged my kitchen. She told me my furniture was outdated. She suggested I might be more comfortable in the smaller bedroom upstairs, the one that used to be Michael's when he was a boy. I refused, of course. This was my bedroom, the one I shared with Robert, the one where I held his hand the morning the hospice nurse told me he had hours left. But Amanda didn't give up. She just smiled and said, of course, whatever made me happy. She started calling me Mom 6 months after they moved in. I never asked her to. It felt wrong coming from her mouth, like she was trying on a word that didn't fit. But Michael seemed pleased, so I said nothing. I've learned to say nothing about a lot of things. Robert and I bought this house in 1978. It was a fixer-upper on the edge of town, with a backyard that stretched all the way to the tree line and a front porch that caught the evening light just right. We didn't have much money back then. Robert worked at the plant and I taught 2nd grade at the elementary school. We scraped together every penny for the down payment, and I remember the day we got the keys. I cried. Not because the house was beautiful, it wasn't. Not yet, but because it was ours. We painted every room ourselves. Robert built the deck. I planted roses along the fence, the same roses that still bloom every June, though now they're overgrown and no one but me seems to notice. Michael was born in the bedroom upstairs, the one Amanda wanted me to move into. I refused the hospital because I wanted him to enter the world in the home we made for him. Robert held my hand through every contraction. And when Michael finally came, red-faced and wailing, Robert cried harder than I did. We raised him here, taught him to ride a bike in the driveway, measured his height on the doorframe in the kitchen every birthday, watched him graduate high school in the backyard, surrounded by neighbors and family and the smell of my lemon cake. He was a good boy, quiet, thoughtful, a little too eager to please. Maybe, but kind. He went to college an hour away and came home every weekend to help Robert with projects around the house. When he met Amanda, I was happy for him. She was pretty, confident, ambitious. She worked in marketing, talked about moving to the city, about making something of herself. I thought she would be good for Michael. I thought she would push him to dream bigger. I didn't realize she would push him away from us. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was Thanksgiving. 2 years after they got married, a year before Robert got sick. Amanda didn't want to host at their apartment. She said it was too small. So we had everyone here like we always did. I spent 2 days cooking. Turkey, stuffing, green bean casserole, 3 kinds of pie. Robert set up the long table in the dining room, the one we only used for holidays. Amanda arrived late. She walked in wearing white pants, white sweater, and the first thing she said was that it smelled really strong in here. Not hello, not happy Thanksgiving. Just a comment that made me feel like I'd done something wrong. She barely touched the food. She spent most of dinner on her phone. And when I asked if she wanted to take leftovers home, she wrinkled her nose and said they were trying to eat clean right now, but thanks. Michael didn't say anything. He just looked at his plate. I told myself it didn't matter. People have different ways of being. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But it kept happening. Little comments. little moments where I felt smaller. When Robert got his diagnosis stage for pancreatic cancer, Amanda didn't visit the hospital once. She sent flowers. She texted Michael to say she was thinking of us. But she never came. I didn't blame her at first. Hospitals are hard. Death is hard. Maybe she didn't know what to say. But when Robert died, when I stood in this house surrounded by casseroles from neighbors and cards from people I hadn't spoken to in years, Amanda showed up for 10 minutes. She hugged me quickly, said something about needing to get back to work, and left. Michael stayed. He stayed for 3 days, sleeping on the couch, helping me sort through Robert's things. And when he finally said he had to go home, I felt the silence crash over me like a wave. That's when he suggested they move in. At first it was almost nice. The house didn't feel so empty. I heard footsteps in the morning, voices in the kitchen. Amanda made coffee expensive. Coffee she ordered online, and sometimes she'd pour me a cup without asking. She redecorated the living room. New curtains, new throw pillows, a rug I didn't pick out. I told myself it was fine. It was just things. And maybe she was right. Maybe the house did need updating. But then she started talking about the basement. She stood at the top of the basement stairs one evening with her hands on her hips and said it was wasted space. She said we could finish it, turn it into a rental unit, get extra income. I stared at her. I told her this house wasn't a rental property. She gave me that smile again and said she knew. She just thought we should be smart about maximizing the space, especially if we were all living here. I didn't argue. I was too tired. And besides, Michael was nodding along like it made perfect sense. They didn't finish the basement. But Amanda started making other changes. She threw out my old dishes and replaced them with matching white plates from some expensive store. She got rid of Robert's chair, the one he sat in every night to read the paper. She said it was falling apart, but it wasn't. It was just worn. It was his. I found it on the curb the next morning. I stood there in my bathrobe staring at it, and I felt something crack inside me. But I didn't say anything. The breaking point came slowly, like water wearing down stone. Amanda started asking about money. Not directly, never directly. She'd mention bills. She'd sigh over the cost of groceries. She'd talk about how expensive it was to raise 2 kids, how hard it was to get ahead when you're living on one income. Michael had gone back to work, but Amanda stayed home with the kids. I didn't mind that. I understood. Childcare is expensive. But then she started asking about my finances. She wanted to know how much my pension was. She asked if I still had the savings account with Robert's name on it. She wondered if I'd thought about what happens to the house if something happens to me. I didn't like the questions. They felt invasive. But I answered because I didn't know how not to. I told her about my teacher's pension, about the savings account, about the life insurance policy that paid out when Robert died. I told her the house was paid off. I told her everything. And that's when things started to change. Amanda began talking about my future. She said I was getting older, that it wasn't safe for me to live alone, that I needed to think practically about what would happen if I got sick, if I fell, if I couldn't take care of myself. She told me they were here now, but they couldn't stay forever. She said we needed to plan. She brought up assisted living, not in a cruel way. She framed it as concern. She printed out brochures and left them on the kitchen counter. She talked about a facility 20 minutes away that had beautiful grounds and a wonderful community. She said I'd have friends there, activities, I wouldn't be lonely. I wasn't lonely. I was surrounded by people. I just didn't feel seen by any of them. Michael stayed quiet during these conversations. He'd nod. He'd say things like, "It's something to think about." But he wouldn't look at me. I started to realize he wasn't on my side anymore. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for tea and heard voices in the kitchen. Amanda and Michael, talking in low tones. I stood in the hallway, hidden in shadow, and listened. Michael was saying she wasn't going to agree to it. Amanda's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. She said they needed to be more direct. She said they couldn't keep living like this. She said this house was worth $500,000. Maybe more. and I was sitting on it like it was some kind of shrine. Michael said it was my house. Amanda said it was their future. His, hers, the kids. She said I didn't need all this space, that I didn't even use half the rooms. Michael said he didn't know that it felt wrong. Amanda asked what felt wrong about watching there. Kids grow up in a house that wasn't. Even theirs while. I hoarded equity I'd never use. Silence. Then Michael asked what she wanted him to do. Amanda told him to talk to me. Really talk to me. Make me see that selling was the best option for everyone. I stepped back into the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. I went back upstairs. I didn't make tea. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall until the sun came up. Michael came to me 2 days later. We were in the living room. He sat on the couch, the new couch Amanda had picked out, and I sat in the chair by the window, the only piece of furniture I'd managed to keep. He said we needed to talk about the house. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. He told me he and Amanda had been talking. He said they thought it might be time to consider selling. I repeated the word selling. He said he knew it was hard to think about. But I wasn't getting any younger, and this place was a lot to maintain. He said they thought maybe I could move somewhere smaller, somewhere easier, and they could use the money to buy their own place and start fresh. I felt very calm. It's calm. I told him this was my home. He said he knew, but it was just a house, and I could make a new home somewhere with less upkeep. I told him this was where I raised him. He looked down and said he knew. I told him this was where his father died. He said he knew. I asked if he wanted me to sell it so he could start fresh. He didn't answer. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I stood. I told him to tell Amanda that this house was mine, not hers, not his. Mine. And I would decide what happens to it. I left the room. Things got worse after that. Amanda stopped speaking to me unless she had to. Michael avoided me. The kids were kept away, whisked upstairs, or out the door before I could say hello. I felt like a ghost in my own home. I started locking my bedroom door. I started keeping my important documents in a box under my bed. I didn't trust them anymore. I didn't trust my own son. One afternoon, I found Amanda in my bedroom. She was going through my dresser. I asked her what she was doing. My voice came out sharper than I intended. She jumped. She said she was just looking for the heating pad. That Michael said I kept it in there. I told her it was in the hall closet. It had always been in the hall closet. She said, "Right, sorry," and gave me that smile again. But her eyes were cold. I watched her leave. Then I checked my dresser. The envelope with Robert's life insurance information was out of place. I called my daughter Emily that night. She lives in Oregon, 2,000 miles away. We talk once a month, maybe. She has her own life, her own family. I didn't want to burden her, but I didn't know who else to call. Emily sounded surprised when she answered. She asked if everything was okay. I told her everything. The questions about money, the pressure to sell, Amanda going through my things. Emily was quiet for a long time. Then she told me I needed to talk to a lawyer. I asked why a lawyer. She said if they were trying to pressure me into selling, if they were going through my documents, I needed to protect myself legally. I started to say Michael wouldn't do that, but Emily interrupted me. Her voice was gentle but firm. She said Michael wasn't the same person he was. She said Amanda was in his ear. She said I needed to protect myself. I didn't want to believe her, but deep down I knew she was right. I found a lawyer through a friend at church. Her name was Margaret Chen. She was younger than me, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense way of speaking. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she said I needed to make sure all my assets were protected. She asked if I had a will. I told her yes, from years ago. She asked if Michael knew what was in it. I said I thought so. He was the executor. Margaret nodded. She said we were going to update that. She said we were going to make sure Amanda had no access to any of my accounts or property. She said we'd also draft a letter making it clear that I was of sound mind and that any decisions about my home or finances were mine alone to make. I felt a weight lift. I asked if they could force me to sell. She said not unless I was deemed incapacitated. She said from where she was sitting, I was sharper than half her clients. I almost cried. I didn't tell Michael or Amanda about the lawyer, but I started standing up for myself in small ways. When Amanda suggested I might want to downsize my belongings, I said no. When she asked about my bank account, I told her it was none of her business. When Michael tried to bring up selling again, I cut him off. I told him I'd spoken to a lawyer. I said this house was mine, it would stay mine, and when I died, it would go to Emily and him equally as outlined in my will. I said I would not be bullied into giving it up while I was still alive. Michael's face went pale. He started to say they weren't trying to bully me. I told him yes, they were. Amanda appeared in the doorway. She asked what was going on. I looked directly at her and told her I'd updated my will. I said I'd also made it clear to my lawyer that I was of sound mind and that any future claims otherwise would be contested. I suggested she stop going through my things. Her face flushed. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. I told her yes, she did. For the first time in 3 years, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear. They moved out 6 weeks later. Michael said they'd found a place closer to his work. Amanda said nothing. She packed in silence, barely looking at me. The kids came to say goodbye. They hugged me quickly, awkwardly, and I realized I barely knew them anymore. Michael hugged me last. He held on a little longer than I expected. He whispered that he was sorry. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. Maybe I never would be. The house is quiet now, but it's a different kind of quiet. It's mine again. I've started going through Robert's things. The things I couldn't bear to touch after he died. I've framed some of his old photographs and hung them in the hallway. I've put his chair back in the living room, rescued from a neighbor's garage where I'd asked them to store it. I sit in it sometimes, in the evenings with a cup of tea and a book, and I feel him near me. Emily calls more often now. She's planning to visit this summer with her husband and kids. I told her I'd make lemon cake. I've also started going to a support group at the senior center. It's for older adults dealing with family conflict. I didn't think I'd like it, but I do. There are 12 of us, all with similar stories, all learning to reclaim our dignity. Last week, a woman named Barbara told us her daughter-in-law tried to get her, declared mentally incompetent, so she could take control of her assets. Barbara fought back. She won. We all clapped. I still think about Michael sometimes. I wonder if he thinks about me, if he regrets what happened, if he understands what he almost did. I don't hate him. I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just sad. Sad that he couldn't see what he was losing until it was almost gone. Sad that he let someone else define what mattered. Sad that he forgot where he came from. This morning, I walked through the house and opened all the curtains. Light poured in, bright and clean. I made coffee the regular kind and sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper. The roses are blooming again. I can see them from the window, wild and pink and stubborn. Robert planted those roses. He said they reminded him of me, strong, beautiful, impossible to get rid of. I laughed when he said it, but he was right. I'm still here, still standing, still blooming. And this house, this beautiful, stubborn, imperfect house is still mine. I've learned something in these last few years, something I wish I'd known sooner. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they're family. You don't owe them your home, your money, your peace. You don't owe them silence when they hurt you. Love doesn't mean letting yourself be erased. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. I'm 73 years old. I've lived through loss and grief and betrayal. I've been made small in my own home. I've been told I'm too old, too stubborn, too much. But I'm still here, and I'm learning, slowly, to take up space again. To speak, to stand, to remember that I matter. Not because of what I can give, not because of what I own, but because I'm human, because I'm enough, because this life, this body, this voice, they're mine, and no one gets to take that from me. The rain started this afternoon, soft and steady, the kind Robert loved. I stood on the porch and watched it fall, soaking the roses, pooling in the driveway. I thought about everything I've lost, everything I fought for, everything I've kept. And I realized something. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living. Really living. For the first time in years, I'm not afraid of the silence. I'm not afraid of being alone. Because I'm not alone. I have myself. And that I've learned is enough. Tonight, I'll make soup. I'll sit in Robert's chair and read. I'll listen to the rain and feel the weight of this house around me not as a burden, but as a shelter. Tomorrow, I'll call Emily. I'll water the roses. I'll go to the senior center and sit with women who understand. And the day after that, I'll wake up in my own bed, in my own room, in my own home. And I'll remember that I fought for this. I fought for myself, and I won.